Ukraine did not need a stealth bomber. It did not need a carrier strike group. It did not need to knock out every Russian radar from the Black Sea to Moscow. It needed something far more dangerous to a defensive system: scale. Hundreds of drones in the air at the same time, coming across a country so large that even one of the most heavily defended states on Earth is forced to make a choice. What gets protected first? The capital? The refineries? The ports? The air bases? The factories? The rail hubs? The warehouses? Or the front line? That is the real story behind Ukraine's latest mass drone campaign. The headline number is dramatic. More than 600 drones in a major wave, according to current reporting, while Russian authorities claimed even higher interception totals during some of the recent attacks. But the most important question is not whether every drone reached its target. The important question is what happens to a national air defense network when it has to react to hundreds of threats spread across enormous distances, night after night. Because if Ukraine can keep forcing Russia to defend everything, then Russia may eventually discover that it cannot defend everything equally. And that is where this story becomes much bigger than one night of explosions. Russian authorities have repeatedly announced enormous interception numbers during Ukraine's recent long-range attacks. In one early August wave, Moscow said 635 Ukrainian drones were downed overnight. In another major attack later in the month, Russian officials said hundreds more were destroyed as drones spread across Russian regions. Those are Russian wartime claims, and exact numbers are difficult to verify independently. But even if we assume Russian air defenses destroyed a very large percentage of the incoming aircraft, the scale itself creates a problem. Air defense is not magic. It is a chain. First, something has to detect the target. Then, it has to identify it. Then commanders have to decide whether it is dangerous enough to engage. Then the right weapon, electronic warfare system, mobile gun team, interceptor or fighter has to be in the right place. And all of that has to happen before a relatively small flying machine crosses the final few kilometers to a refinery, radar, fuel depot, warehouse, airfield, command site or transportation node. Now multiply that problem by hundreds. Then spread those hundreds across a country spanning 11 time zones. That is the pressure Ukraine is trying to create. A defender does not win simply because it shoots down more drones than get through. A defender wins if the cost of stopping the attack remains manageable and the protected system keeps functioning. That is why the raw interception number can actually hide the more important strategic question. If Russia launches expensive missiles, keeps fighter aircraft in the air, activates radars, shuts airports, disperses mobile teams, relocates air defense batteries, interrupts civilian traffic, and still suffers occasional hits on valuable infrastructure, then Ukraine may be extracting a return even from drones that never reach their intended target. That is saturation warfare. And saturation changes the economics of defense. Think about a single guarded building with one entrance. If one person tries to enter, the guard has an easy job. If 10 people arrive at once, the guard has a harder job. If hundreds arrive from different directions while alarms are going off at 3 other buildings, now the problem is no longer just stopping one intruder. The problem is allocating limited attention, manpower, sensors, ammunition, and time. Russia has enormous military resources. That is not in dispute, but its geography is also enormous. Every additional site that Moscow decides must be protected creates another demand on the same network. And Ukraine appears to understand that. The targets in these campaigns are not random points on a map. Recent reporting has described attacks or attempted attacks involving refineries, logistics facilities, ports, military-industrial sites, air defense positions, and large commercial warehouses that Ukraine says have connections to the Russian war effort. A Wildberries warehouse has become an especially striking symbol because Wildberries is known primarily as a giant Russian online retailer. But from Kiev's perspective, the argument is that logistics is logistics. A system capable of moving civilian goods at massive scale can also become relevant to wartime supply chains. Ukraine has targeted multiple facilities associated with the company, according to recent reports, although Moscow and Kiev naturally describe the military significance of those sites differently. And that points to the deeper Ukrainian strategy. Ukraine cannot match Russia shell for shell, aircraft for aircraft, or missile for missile in every category, so it has increasingly tried to make distance less useful to Moscow. For years, geography was one of Russia's greatest defensive advantages. Move an aircraft farther from the border. Move a refinery deeper inland. Put production hundreds of kilometers away. Build logistics networks so far behind the front that conventional Ukrainian weapons cannot easily reach them. Long-range drones attack that assumption. They do not erase geography, but they make geography more expensive. A site 500 kilometers from Ukraine is no longer automatically a rear area sanctuary. A site 800 kilometers away may not be safe simply because it is far from the battlefield. Facilities deeper inside Russia must now think about camouflage, dispersal, local air defenses, electronic warfare, fire suppression, redundancy, and continuity plans. Every one of those measures costs money. Every battery protecting a refinery is a battery that may not be somewhere else. Every radar watching one approach cannot physically occupy another location hundreds of kilometers away. Every interceptor fired today is one that has to be replaced tomorrow. And every airport shut because drones are nearby creates disruption even if nothing on the ground is destroyed. That last part matters more than it looks. In modern warfare, disruption can be a weapon by itself. Imagine a drone wave moving toward several regions. Civil aviation authorities may have to suspend flights. Security forces may close roads around sensitive areas. Industrial facilities may halt processes or move workers to shelters. Emergency services may be repositioned. Air defense crews go on maximum alert. Military commanders receive streams of reports, some accurate, some uncertain, some possibly decoys. Now imagine doing that repeatedly. The attacker is no longer trying only to blow something up. The attacker is forcing the defender to live inside a permanent emergency. And Ukraine has another advantage in this equation. Drones can be produced in quantity. Ukraine's long-range drone ecosystem has evolved rapidly during the war. Systems such as the FP1 and other domestically produced designs have been developed around a philosophy very different from the exquisite, extremely expensive cruise missile. They are designed to travel far enough, carry enough explosive power to matter, and be produced in numbers large enough to create mass. That does not make them unstoppable. Many are shot down. Others are jammed, diverted, malfunction, or fail to cause serious damage. A single drone may carry only a fraction of the destructive power of a large missile. But that misses the point. The value of mass is not that every weapon succeeds. The value is that the defender cannot know which one will. One drone could be heading toward an empty field. Another could be aimed at a radar. Another could be a decoy. Another could be carrying enough explosives to start a fire in an industrial complex. Another might be approaching a fuel storage area. Another may never make it close. The defense still has to react. And once the sky contains hundreds of uncertain tracks, the defender's problem becomes mathematical. How many targets can the sensors track at once? How many can electronic warfare suppress? How many interceptor missiles are available? How quickly can gun crews reload? How many batteries can be moved without exposing another area? Which objects are decoys? Which ones are priority threats? Which ones are already too close? That is why the phrase air defense is overwhelmed has to be understood carefully. It does not mean every Russian system suddenly stopped working. It does not mean Russia has no air defense. And it certainly does not mean every Ukrainian drone flew through untouched. It means Ukraine is trying to generate more simultaneous defensive problems than Russia can solve perfectly. Perfection is the key word. Russia does not have to fail everywhere. It only has to fail somewhere important. If 90% of a large wave is defeated, the remaining fraction can still be enough to create serious consequences if the surviving drones reach high-value targets. If the interception rate is even higher, the defender may still pay heavily in ammunition, readiness, operational disruption, and the need to protect a wider list of sites. That is what makes these attacks strategically uncomfortable for Moscow. Russia's air defense doctrine was built to protect critical targets from aircraft, missiles, and other threats. It includes sophisticated long-range systems, shorter-range defenses, electronic warfare, fighter aircraft, and increasingly improvised mobile teams. But no defense architecture is infinitely dense. Russia must protect the battlefield. It must protect Crimea. It must protect Black Sea facilities. It must protect strategic bomber bases. It must protect Moscow. It must protect energy infrastructure. It must protect arms factories. It must protect transport nodes. It must protect command centers. And now it must increasingly protect civilian industrial infrastructure that may also support the war economy. The list keeps growing. The number of batteries does not grow just because the target list does. That creates a brutal strategic choice. Move more defenses into the Russian interior, and parts of the front or occupied territories may become thinner. Keep the strongest defenses near the battlefield, and rear area industry becomes more exposed. Concentrate around Moscow and other regions, take more risk. Spread everything evenly, and nothing receives maximum protection. This is not a uniquely Russian problem. Every country with a large territory would face it. The United States would face it. China would face it. NATO would face it. Air defense has always been a problem of priorities because there are never enough weapons to put the strongest shield over every possible target. Ukraine is exploiting that universal weakness. That is why the Black Sea is part of this story. Recent Ukrainian operations around Novorossiysk demonstrated how drones and missiles can pressure one of Russia's most strategically important maritime zones. Reporting described strikes on port infrastructure, air defenses, and piers, while politically sensitive energy infrastructure created an additional complication, because attacks around oil export routes can affect countries and companies far beyond Russia and Ukraine. That introduces another layer of constraint. Ukraine wants to hit the system supporting Russia's war, but it also has to consider Western political pressure, global oil markets, civilian risk, and the danger of escalation. Russia faces its own constraint. It can fortify every strategic port more heavily, but again, those systems come from somewhere. The same logic applies to refineries. Ukraine has repeatedly targeted energy infrastructure because fuel is not just an export commodity. It is the bloodstream of a mechanized military and a major source of state revenue. A refinery does not need to be permanently destroyed to create military or economic pressure. Fires, shutdowns, repairs, delayed production, rerouted supply, and repeated security alerts can all matter. But we should be precise here. A dramatic explosion does not automatically mean a strategic industry has been crippled. Modern industrial systems can be repaired. Production can sometimes be shifted. Spare capacity exists. Governments can absorb losses. The significance comes from repetition. One strike is damage. A campaign is a system. And Ukraine increasingly appears to be waging campaigns. Campaigns against oil infrastructure. Campaigns against logistics. Campaigns against air bases. Campaigns against Black Sea assets. Campaigns designed to make Russia keep moving defenses around the board. That may be the most important shift. The war is no longer divided neatly between frontline and rear area. For Russia, the rear area is getting deeper. And for Ukraine, that may partially compensate for Russia's numerical advantages at the front. Not completely. Drones cannot retake territory by themselves. They cannot hold a trench. They cannot replace infantry, artillery, air defense, engineering troops, or armored forces. Destroying a warehouse hundreds of kilometers away does not automatically stop a Russian unit attacking in Donetsk. But deep strikes can influence the conditions under which those frontline forces operate. Fuel has to move, ammunition has to move, replacement equipment has to move, aircraft need bases, missiles need storage and assembly, command systems need communications, factories need components, ports need infrastructure, railways need power and signaling. War is a giant logistics machine. Ukraine is trying to attack the machine, not just the soldiers at the edge of it. For Ukraine, however, there is also serious risk. Large drone waves increase the possibility of debris falling on civilian areas. Navigation errors can have deadly consequences. Air defense interceptions themselves can create danger. Both sides have accused the other of attacks that caused civilian deaths. And independent verification is often incomplete in the immediate aftermath. Recent mass attacks have produced reported civilian casualties on both sides of the border. That is why every dramatic viral headline about hundreds of drones needs a layer of caution. This is not a video game. When saturation increases, so does the potential for unintended harm. Strategically, though, the trend is unmistakable. Mass unmanned warfare is changing the cost curve. A country no longer needs hundreds of crude bombers to put hundreds of airborne threats into an opponent's defensive picture. It needs factories, engines, navigation systems, explosives, software, launch crews, and a production pipeline. That is a profound transformation. The defender may possess more advanced technology than the attacker, yet still face a dangerous equation if the attacker can manufacture threats faster than the defender can manufacture affordable answers. This is the same problem navies face with cheap anti-ship drones. It is the same problem troops face with FPV drones. And now it is becoming a national air defense problem. The question is not whether Russia can shoot down Ukrainian drones. Clearly, it can. The question is how many, how often, at what cost, and with what gaps created elsewhere. That is the question Putin cannot solve simply by announcing another interception number. Because imagine the next phase. Ukraine launches another giant wave, but this time the attack is mixed differently. Some drones head toward energy infrastructure, some toward military facilities, some toward logistics, some may be decoys. Some approach from routes intended to stretch detection. Russia responds by moving additional defenses to areas hit previously. Then Ukraine changes the target set again. That is how saturation becomes a campaign of exhaustion. Not necessarily exhaustion of missiles alone. Exhaustion of crews. Exhaustion of maintenance cycles. Exhaustion of command attention. Exhaustion of logistics. Exhaustion of the assumption that the rear is safe. And if that continues long enough, the strategic impact may appear in places that do not look connected to drones at all. A delayed rail shipment, a refinery operating below normal capacity, a fighter base relocating aircraft, a port changing procedures, an air defense battery pulled away from another sector, a military factory building protective structures instead of expanding production, an airport repeatedly suspending flights. Each event by itself may be manageable. Together, they create friction, and war is often decided by accumulated friction. So, what should we watch next? First, watch where Russia relocates its air defense systems. If more protection moves toward Moscow, major industrial sites, ports, and refineries, that tells us the deep strike campaign is influencing force allocation. Second, watch Russian airport disruptions. Airports are useful indicators because temporary closures reveal where authorities believe a real airborne threat exists, even when official military details are limited. Third, watch repair cycles at refineries, warehouses, rail infrastructure, and other repeatedly targeted facilities. One headline fire means little. Repeated outages across multiple sites mean more. Fourth, watch Ukraine's production capacity. Large attacks only become strategically transformative if Kyiv can repeat them. A spectacular one-night wave is a headline. Sustained mass over months is doctrine. And fifth, watch the mix of weapons. Ukraine is not relying on one drone type forever. The more it combines long-range drones with missiles, maritime systems, cyber operations, decoys, and intelligence, the harder the defensive puzzle becomes. That is the real meaning of this latest wave. Ukraine has not made Russian air defense disappear. It may be doing something more strategically useful. It is forcing Russia to reveal the limits of how much territory, infrastructure, and military power can be protected at the same time. Hundreds of drones do not have to destroy hundreds of targets. They only have to create hundreds of decisions. And somewhere inside those decisions, the defender eventually makes a mistake. A radar misses a track. A battery is covering another sector. An interceptor arrives too late. A decoy pulls attention away. A valuable site is left with thinner protection than commanders expected. That single opening is what mass creates. And that is why Ukraine's 600 drone-scale attacks matter far beyond the explosions seen on social media. They are not simply attacks on buildings, they are attacks on Russia's defensive math. The Kremlin can replace damaged windows, it can repair warehouses, it can restore pipelines, it can move aircraft and build shelters. What it cannot do is shrink Russia. And every kilometer of that enormous territory is another kilometer that has to be watched, defended, supplied, and prioritized. Ukraine is betting that a country with more land, more weapons, and more resources can still be forced into an impossible choice if enough threats appear in enough places at once. Defend Moscow, or defend the refinery. Defend the port, or defend the airbase. Defend the rear, or defend the front. Russia can do all of them. The question is whether it can do all of them, at full strength, every night. That is the pressure point. And if Ukraine can keep pressing it, the next decisive strike may not be the drone that gets through. It may be the air defense system Russia was forced to move somewhere else.